Call to order the Assembly work session on the 2016 proposed budget. And I think the mayor is going to start off the work session. Are you, Mayor? That's
Yes.
what I was told. Thank you. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of brief opening remarks before I hand it over to Lance Wilbur, who's OMB. First, I want to thank everybody in the municipality who helped put this budget together. It's not an easy task, and there's a lot of people who work long and hard at it, and I think they deserve recognition and support as we move forward. And I want to thank the Assembly for the attention you're going to pay to this and the scrutiny you've given. I think this is how the public process ought to work. With that being said, we live in a growing city, but at the same time, there's shrinking state funding. And in some ways, this budget reflects the fact that Anchorage is going to pay some price for the state's fiscal crisis. It's also going to pay a price because this year the Regulatory Commission will ask us that we couldn't have an MLNP dividend. Our priority, the priority that we expressed for the past year, and I believe it's a priority of the Assembly, is to enhance public safety, to increase the number of officers on the street. So that's reflected in this budget. We also wanted to make sure that we were maintaining the adequate level of services with other aspects of the municipality's responsibility. So that's the general overview of what the budget is. When we build a budget, you have to build it for the particular year that you're doing it. But you also have to have some recognition that a budget can have an impact on the future. If you don't make the right investments, if you are too stringent in some places and not adequate in others, it has long-term consequences. So all that being said, what you're going to see in terms of raw numbers is a budget that is smaller than last year's budget in nominal terms. It's about $1.8 million smaller. If you were to factor in the CPI of 2.2 and population growth of 0.6%, we've got a budget that's $15 million smaller in adjusted terms than last year. And at the same time, we believe that we've put us on the right course for maintaining fiscal responsibility and fiscal discipline and enhancing public safety. So that being said, I'll let Lance take you through more details.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we continue, we need to introduce ourselves for the record, so we'll start with you, Mr. Mayor.
Ethan Berkowitz, Mayor of Anchorage.
Lance Wilbur, Director of Office of Management and Budget.
Patrick Wood.
L.V. Gray Jackson.
Dick Trainer.
David Boston.
Tim Steele.
Bill Evans.
Jennifer Johnson.
Pete Peterson.
And welcome to everybody who's in the audience. Lance, you have the floor. Mr. Trainee has a question first.
Lance, on slide 11, it says APD fines. Are we going to get a big breakdown on that? I want to know exactly what fines are being raised or suggested we raise them. Are we going to get that information today?
You are not.
When will we get that?
The Assembly has multiple work sessions scheduled, I think every Friday in October. We can take the time during one of those work sessions on any other one of those days and take them.
Because I've been through this a few times, and anytime we raise fines and fees, the public wants to know, why are you charging us? And so I just want to know what we're actually going to
I
be
will be
raising.
highlighting those when we get to that slide.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. And Mr. Johnston.
As far as building a budget, you're saying looking forward, the administration will hopefully be giving us an in-depth 6-year fiscal plan, so we can, and this is going to be probably very difficult here to do that.
And I want to emphasize that part of what we need to take steps to do is insulate ourselves as much as possible from, I think, the chaos that's now being seen in the state capitol. And the more autonomous we can be, the better we're going to be. And I also think that has helped the state and other communities around Alaska as well.
So, and that could be addressed in the 6-year fiscal plan.
One other question I have. Would you like questions during your presentation or after? I mean, what's going to work best for you is what I'm asking.
The presentation is going to be broken down into 3 different sections: general government, capital, and then utilities. Maybe after I finish each section, you want to handle it that way.
Okay, is that all right with everybody? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. Well, I want to begin with an outline of today's presentation. Really, this presentation may be a little bit different than Assembly members have received in the past as its initial presentation for the budget. I'm going to take the time to give a high-level overview of each of the individual areas, the general government and its operating, the capital budget, and a little bit on the utilities and enterprise, and then questions at the end. So, as I mentioned to Assembly Member Trainee, there are work sessions scheduled throughout the rest of October on Fridays, and so we would encourage the Assembly to schedule those times to go in depth detail with each one of those capital budget. The directors available, the managers of the utilities, and then folks, if you have questions about particular capital projects, we can bring those to you. But before I start into the presentation, maybe a little bit about how we got to where we are on October 2nd. Since the mayor took office on July, in the last 3 months, he has spent time reviewing the current department budgets, the performance, the service they provide, what their priorities are. He's heard through members of the Assembly, members of the community on the things that they want to see, and making sure that the budget that we're preparing in this 3 months period is reflective of that as much as possible on the time that we have. I think the department heads have provided an honest assessment of where they are and where they would like to go, and he shared those with the mayor. Many of those are been considered. Some of them are included, some of them are not. Public safety was really one of the high ones there. And I think that when we're looking at the overall budget, these are going to be very high numbers, and then we can talk about some details at the end. So in the general government, the following slides, I'm going to talk a couple slides about really some bottom line highlights. What are the direct costs? What are we doing with fund balance? What are the priority services? And then review the budget by categories, what we're going to be looking to spend it on, and where the funds are coming from. We are proposing a department reorganization. Talk a little bit about that. We, as Mr. Trainee suggested, we have some revenue adjustments that we want to do, and then I'm going to highlight the department adjustments based on programs and service and on personnel on that slide. So here, these two slides are the bottom line of the budget. So our direct costs in our proposed 2016 budget are down from the existing 2015 approved budget with the first quarter budget revisions. So, and I think that took a lot of work to get there, and I believe it's a very good place to start. Our non-property tax revenues, as the mayor made in his opening comments, we have traditionally depended on non-property tax revenues to support operations of public services. We are looking at an $11 million reduction. It's a combination of about $4 million reduction from revenue sharing and a loss of our MLP for that. When you review the budget, our intergovernmental costs, those are charges between governments, between departments. That's down a little more than $800,000 across all general government services. Our fund balance. In fund balance, it's composed of a variety of different things. In this proposed budget, there are two areas that we will be using a little fund balance. One is the Trans-Alaska Pipeline settlement. There was a recent settlement from the court to release some funds that we had set aside in the event that local governments lost and payment was due. We are going to allocate about $4.5 million from that resource. And then there's been a recent tobacco tax settlement. It potentially could be more than $750,000 in the end. In working with our folks in finance and treasury, we took a conservative approach, and we are looking to use $750,000 as part of our supporting our budget. While doing that, we are continuing to maintain the fund balance requirement that we need to preserve our bond ratings and an additional 2% for our working capital and emergencies. So we are maintaining that to make sure that our bond rating is still solid. We do have one-time expenditures. You will see those. They're primarily in police and fire. They are predominantly as they related to the academies. The mayor, in his announcement earlier this week, he recognized that we are going to build public safety through police and fire, and starting with those academies. So here are some other bottom line numbers I want to bring out to the Assembly. The mayor mentioned when we make adjustments in preparing our budget, we do adjust for population and for consumer price index. These are running 5-year averages. We project a 0.6% in 2016 and a 2.2 for consumer price index. That is slightly less than we had in 2015. For property tax, our total property tax revenues, this budget proposes a slight increase, about 4.3%, for a total of $11.5 million. That equates to about $50 in addition to a $300,000 value home. In addition to the property tax ones, we have service areas that are taxed separately. And there really is a very, very slight decrease in service areas. It's roughly about a $17 million total number. In service areas, it's still about $17.5 million total, but going down a little. When we prepare a budget, we have to be conscious of our spending limit. We are about $3.5 million under the limit for this proposed budget. And then through the conversations and proposals from the departments, the combination of the police academy and the fire department, and as well as making some adjustments in our budget as it relates to our ERP. Many of you may recognize that as our SAP program, but until we figure out what we're going to do, that's I recognize it here that way. If you look at all of the positions from 2015 that and those that were recommended for additions and subtraction, the total net general government position count is +2. And then I'll talk a little bit about how that's explained when we get to the departments. And then the ERP for the capital costs. I mean, those positions that we had previously in the budget, we're looking to fund those with other sources once we know when it's going to go online, how much it is, when it's going to start. So we didn't presume anything that we don't know preparing this budget. So the next couple slides I want to share with the Assembly sort of the overview of where the budget categories are on the expenditure side. These two pie charts are available when we look at the overview for the overview of the entire operating budget. Traditionally and consistently, the personnel cost is the largest portion of our expenditures at about 56%. A very small capital outlay in our operating budget. We accommodate debt service, very small travel and supplies. Many of the supplies are fuel and parts. On the funding sources, this is a reflection of the proposed budget where we receive resources from a variety of different areas. Again, property tax continues to be part of that. We did have some fund balance that I recognize that I mentioned that earlier. I won't go through each one of these. We do, do some of the state and federal revenues. Those are program funds more than they are special requests, license fees. Mr. Trainee, the number that you see there assumes the revenue adjustments for police fines and fees. So those are the breakdown of the fund sources. I mentioned that we are doing a department reorganization. I'd like to draw your attention primarily to the right side of the screen. The administration is creating an Office of Economic and Community Development. The difference there from the previous organization is that departments of development services, the library, Parks and Recreation, the planning department, and real estate will now report to Chris Schutte. Some of those those previously reported to the municipal manager, and so that is that's a change there. On the municipal manager side, one change is the employee relations director will now be reporting to the municipal manager, not directly to the mayor. the office or departments of maintenance and operations and traffic and public works administration. They will be all reporting. Those will be adjustments to the municipal manager. The net of that difference is about a $4,000 reduction in the cost, and there's no additional personnel. So it's really a no net gain in cost. And frankly, it's a very small decrease. So that is the proposal we're asking the Assembly to consider. Some revenue adjustments, as Mr. Trainee mentioned earlier. I just point out that there will be two types of revenues adjustments that we're asking for. Some of them will require a code change, and some of them will not. Under the Anchorage Police Department traffic fines and others, the predominant amount of that is about it's a total of roughly $1 million. About $700,000 of that is for moving violations, speeding, red light running, those types of things in construction, speeding in construction, speeding in school zones, making some difference. And when we're looking at those fines, and we'll get into more of it in the presentation, we look at our proposal compared to what the state is doing and what other jurisdictions are doing, and then are bringing those up to a comparable standard from other locations. There's a recommendation for an e-plan surcharge. E-planning, electronic plans will be moving forward. We would recommend a surcharge to maintain that system and keep it going through the year. Department of Health and Human Services, they have a couple of changes as well. It's very small. I think it's roughly about $150,000. And the department can talk more specifically about each of those in your presentation. We have some other ones that are very minor. Department of Health and Human Services, the library has some adjustments, and then I think finance and parks and recreation. So I think in the past, well, we've start off these work sessions with departments coming in and giving you straight off the bat what the adjustments are. What I'm going to share with you here are, when you look at your entire operating budget book, these are some generalities of the service and program adjustments, and then some of the positions. So the police and fire retirement fund, we are recommending some changes to the pre-funding that would extend it from 2021 to 2034. We do that, we're taking benefit of current ratings. To if you have questions about that, we'll look to the CFO and the folks in the Treasury to help us with that. The fire department, we have a recommendation and a commitment from the administration for a new academy. We also have some adjustments in their non-labor that we will be recommending. The IT department, most of their changes are in non-labor. The library, they have some reductions in professional services. They also have some adjustments in their labor and staffing that we are proposing to accommodate. Municipal M&O is primarily fuel and a little bit of contract work they have that they put out there. Parks and recreation is primarily labor and positions. Project management engineering, a little bit of labor and a little bit of contracts, in addition of an academy. Real estate services, real estate, you'll see that it's focused on lease rates and reductions in leases. And then the traffic department, we propose we add a little bit in there so they can catch up on a project they're working on to replace the traffic signal system across the municipality of Anchorage, which is primarily funded by the state. On the positions, so this is a net change in positions when you look at 2015 to 2016. We removed 16 positions that were currently funded in the operating budget until we know what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be funding the ERP. Apologies for the positions. We'll do it that way. When you look at a combination of 2015 vacant positions that weren't filled that we carried over, and adjustments of requests, adjustments of other positions, the total net is a reduction in 12 general government positions. That equals a negative 28, so reduction of 28 positions. Then when we add 20 APD officers and we add 10 police fire department, That's a net gain of 2 positions, so that is a proposal that we would ask you to consider. So Madam Chair, that's really a highlight of the operating budget. I can answer some questions, and if there's specific department questions, I have folks that will help us address those later.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbur. First, it's Ms. Johnston.
Just looking through my notes as you were speaking. So if the IDC costs are down, is that a reflection just as your general operating budget is down?
Madam Chair, it's a combination of that and a combination of the ERP position that we didn't expect that those expenses would be there, but I can get you a detailed answer.
And then as far as your fund balance and using the tax, you're using that for your operational budget as opposed to one-time only spending?
Both.
But the one-time only spending was 1.2 million, so you still have over a couple million
That's
that
correct.
you're using, so.
That's
and
correct.
Again, if we look into years to come, we won't have that, so I hope that is included for the fiscal, 6-year fiscal plan. I was interested in as far as the tax service area was decreased. Do you have any, well, you can't have anything for GBOS at this point, but that might change.
We have a breakdown on where those adjustments were made, and we can make that available.
But we have not anticipated a police service area for GBOS at this time.
Yeah, so I guess that's just, as far as the fines, APD fines, and I'm going on memory, and sometimes my memory is really crappy. But the last couple of years, our revenue projections for fines have come in under projections in the police department. So your speeding tickets and other fines have not even come close to what they've been budgeting. Have you taken, I mean, I know you're having additional police academies, but that still will not get feet on the ground right away. Have you taken, are you coming up with a different way of prioritizing speeding tickets or some other way so this, I mean, you raise the fees and you're still not meeting budget projections, this could have issues.
So, in conversations with the police chief, I know he has an idea on how to do it differently. And I think when we sit down with the police department, in addition to how they deal with speeding as a matter of red light running, so I looked at the chief, and I know he has some ideas on how to do that.
So in his presentation, just for, it'd be nice to have the background information of what's happened in the past, why it's happened, and how you're looking at projecting it differently in the coming year.
The total police service area revenue stream, primarily fees and fines, has been adjusted both up and down to recognize the fact that there are some areas where we have not, in recent memory, met our revenue expectations, up in areas where, through a proposal that the Assembly will see shortly, we are proposing to increase some fees and fines, primarily traffic related. So the net is an increase, but it reflects a recognition of the fact that some of our previous estimates have not been realized.
So, and I guess.
Get that into that too. Part of the reason is that when the police department is short-staffed, it doesn't necessarily have the personnel to do the traffic enforcement that results in
Right,
these kind of.
and I understand that, but as you're going through the transition here, I'm just saying as far as the budget, so I hope in the budget presentation that you address historically how it's been done, how you feel that you're going to be able to bring these added revenues in, so that.
Yeah, I think Dan Moore, the treasurer, would be a great resource for you to talk about both the amounts of the fees and fines and the collectability of it. And those variables have been considered as we built the estimate that's in front of you today.
And finally, sorry, one more.
No problem, Ms. Jones.
As far as the police and fire retirement pre-funding, I thought the last time I looked at it, we were pretty close to having it funded to industry norms. That really the pre-funding wasn't as in dire state, great why we might be looking at extending terms. But, I mean, I do understand that this year revenues were fantastic. Next year's might not be as good. And, you know, I think the norm as far as annual income, a lot of the pension funds are looking at 7.5% annually versus 8%. But I thought we were kind of managing that. So I would, in that discussion, I'd like to know if this is really, because whenever you extend terms, of course, you're paying more. So, but I understand.
This is the medical trust pre-funding.
Okay.
This is not the police and fire retirement system.
Okay.
And I totally get why that's confusing, and it should be, it is.
No, and I know there are too.
And again, Dan Moore, again, will be our resource.
Right.
He's supports the pre-funding system in his office.
Right.
And he can explain to you why this does not have a negative impact on either the program or the municipality.
And then just as far as the ERP, the 12, were those the 12 backfill positions? I mean, I understand what you're doing with ERP, and it makes sense, except that I was always hoping that it would come into life before I was out of life.
You're not going to die. You're just well, we hope not.
You should continue to hope.
But and I just, were those the backfill positions as well? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Trainee.
On the E-Plan surcharge, when is that going to go live? We've been talking about this for a long time before you got here. When's it going to go live? What's the date?
I believe it's in the first quarter of next year.
Okay. Just want to make sure that if we tell these people are going to have a surcharge, the surcharge for something that actually works.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Other thing is APD fines. Are we looking to bring back the motorcycle cops? Each motorcycle cop brought us in about $400,000 a year in fines. And a few years ago, 5 or 6, we got rid of them for no good reason. So my question is to you guys, you're looking at bringing them back because they were a source of fines and fees. Take a look at it.
We'll talk to the chief about that, but if you want to put in an application, I'm sure I'll recommend it.
Well, we had a guy named Ted Smith. He's dead now, but he was a motorcycle cop. And every time he got on that thing, the money started rolling in. People didn't expect him, and they were out there catching him. So let's take a look at it. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Trainee?
Nothing, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not worried about the motorcycle cop because I don't speed.
Since why you
Famous last word.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I have a couple of just clarifying questions. When you reference the spending limit under the tax cap, are you doing the entire tax cap, or are you doing just the municipality side? Are you including ASD in that?
It's
It's general government.
the municipality side from Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you.
If I can follow up, Mr. Dombrowski, we're talking about the general government operating budget, so absolutely ASD is not included in this. And I hate to put my 2 cents in your business, but I have to say that. Thank you. Mr. Dombrowski, anything else?
Yeah, I have quite a few actually.
Great.
And I appreciate that clarification, Madam Chair, but I've dealt with multiple administrations, and I want to get it on the record and know exactly what I'm talking about, so there's no miscommunication.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski.
When we were talking about the service area boards, one thing I would like is a breakdown of every service area and the changes, just because I want to see specifically in my area where changes are going, if there's changes or if they're staying steady. But it's helpful for me to track any changes in service areas. And then when we're talking about, Ms. Johnston hit my police and fire retirement question. And I would just say on your slide, when it says police and firemen retirement pre-funding, it would be helpful to have clarifying if you're specifically talking about medical.
Thank you.
That would be helpful because this gives a completely different connotation.
Absolutely.
So I would like a more in-depth analysis of that. So the schedule that we had been talking about for the police and fire retirement specifically, is that not changing, or can you give us more of an analysis of where you see us at and where you see us going with the retirement side too?
I will do that. I will talk to the CFO, Mr. Harris, and we'll get some information for you.
Because that's a big deal.
Absolutely.
And we need to make sure we all understand that. And the last thing is, when we're talking about these 28 positions, if I understand this right, essentially all 28 positions are related to SAP. 16 are the actual SAP positions and 12 are the backfill positions? Okay.
16 of them are related to SAP, the other 12 are scattered across other departments.
Oh, so when you're talking about backfill positions, can you clarify for me what that meant?
So if I recall from the existing budget, we had positions funded in the 2015 to fund backfill. So until we know when SAP is going to start and how much it's going to cost and when it's going to stay, those backfill positions have been taken out in this proposal. When we figure out with SAP, those positions would then get funded with other funding sources than other than operating budget would be our proposal.
Okay, so maybe I'm just being thick here. I'm trying to understand. So I get the 16 positions, the 28 various department positions that, or the 12, sorry,
Yes.
the 12 various department positions were funded backfill positions for the SAP. Okay.
No,
No.
those are other general government positions that are being eliminated.
They're both 12, so I'm trying to understand where this is
Oh.
12. Okay, so other general government. Okay, so that is helpful. Are you going to give us an idea through your previous or your future presentations which departments those are coming from?
We can do that.
That'd be helpful. Okay, that's all my
Thank you, Ms.
requests for
Dombrowski.
right now.
Mr. Flynn.
Madam Chair. Just to quickly follow up on Mr. Dombrowski's line of questioning, do I correctly presume there'll be a corresponding reduction in the capital budget as we reabsorb the SAP folks into the general government?
So on the SAP, ERP, not a quick study, there are no recommendations for funding in the proposed capital budget for the ERP as we have it proposed. So I think it will be a separate capital expense, but it's not in the capital improvement budget.
We probably would be well served at the next work session to spend a little bit of time just sort of understanding which funds are moving where.
The intent is that once we arrive at a recommended solution on the ERP and we're moving forward on that any costs associated with that, whether they're positions in departments or whether they're contractors or whether it's hardware or software, that will be paid for by the project, the capital project, not by the operating budget. In the past, there's been a blend of capital and operating budget spending for that, which is, one way to go. We're recommending that all of the ERP conversion costs be identified and isolated inside of a capital project, even if that means funding operating what had been before been considered operating budget positions. They would be only there for the length of the project.
I think Ms. Johnson wanted to follow up on a specific topic.
Are you finished, Mr. Flynn?
I wasn't, but I don't want to derail the train of thought if Ms. Johnson has to follow on it.
I just follow up to that, and I could be wrong again with my memory, but I think how we got to that spot was through our auditors. So you might just check with them.
Okay.
Would you like to continue, Mr. Flynn?
If you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
I'm a little curious about the utilization of TAP's settlement funding, and specifically about the integrity of those funds. Obviously, this has been an ongoing soap opera amongst various law firms, oil companies in the state of Alaska. And so, if you get Mr. Harris to do a little analysis on how secure he feels at 5.2 million, oh, sorry, 4.5 million, is, that would be nice to know just for my comfort level.
These are 3 years of TAP settlement from 07, 08, and 09. These have been resolved by the Supreme Court. These are funds currently in the municipality's hands that have been sitting in escrow, waiting for that resolution. So I don't believe, I mean, Mr. Harris is absolutely the right person to opine formally on that subject, Mr. Falsey as well, but I don't believe you will, that anybody thinks that these funds are not available to the municipality at this time. There's other ongoing litigation related to 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, but these, I believe, are behind us. Yeah. Similar scales, similar amounts.
Yeah. And I guess it's sort of policy point on that. I understand we're trying to make a drop in state revenue, and that's probably the reason that these are being plugged in here. I'd feel a little better looking forward about using those dollars to help the trust catch up than using them for operating activity. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Ms. Johnston, you're on the list?
No, I was just.
You're off? Okay, thank you. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I have a couple of questions. And the 12 positions in various departments, I'm assuming that they're vacant positions?
Some of them are, and some of them are not.
So does that mean that some employees may be laid off?
Yes.
How many?
I have to get the number for it.
Okay, I would appreciate knowing how many and also from what department. Okay, thank you. My next question is, so on the organizational chart, I didn't see the Office of Equal Opportunity. Where is that? Unless I missed it.
I think you saw under this one manager's office. Sure.
It's under that?
It's the second one. Under
Yeah, I see it. Okay. The office part was missed. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Flynn. That's all I have. Would you like to continue?
If you don't mind, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
So what I'd like to do is the next submittal that the Assembly will be looking at, as we do every year, we have a capital improvement budget and a capital improvement program. I just want to talk about just the budget side right now, and then as your detailed presentation on the capital program, we can talk about the budget and the program. The difference is, for those who might not be aware, the budget focuses on 2016, and a capital improvement program looks at 16 out to 2021. So I just want to highlight a couple things that you will be seeing in the capital improvement budget. I could make a significant list of projects here. The administration has a list of projects for proposal in the budget for bonds, for state grants, some recognizing some dollars from the federal program. In the facility side, there are projects recommended on the facilities. They're really looking at safety and code improvements. You will see those, and many of them are going to look familiar. Frankly, many of the projects that you see in the CIB are going to look very familiar than you may have seen in the past. The Parks and Recreation Department, they're really looking at trails and park facility improvements all across the municipality of Anchorage. The public safety, really what you're going to see there is a heavy rescue piece of equipment, and then some upgrades to the 911 at APD. And then on the transportation side, a combination from roadway improvements, traffic improvements, and then transit. On the roadway improvements, we have a couple significant projects in there. Arctic Boulevard, to complete Arctic Boulevard between Tudor and 36th. You'll see a continuation of some improvements and needs in a matching program for flood and glaciation, and then an improvement to a construction project on Turnagain. But I believe the one thing that's going to draw your attention is the administration is recommending that Spenard Road be completed with bond funds. It will expedite the completion of that project. So we look for your comments on that. I will note that there are many projects on the proposals for 2016. Not all of those projects are necessarily need to be on a bond. And there may be projects, as the Assembly reviews that list, that you want to address or propose as part of the 2016 capital improvement budget. But I just want to make it clear that while you see that list of projects, a proposal in bonds, it doesn't mean that that will be the amount of the bond. That will be determined by a discussion between the administration and the Assembly, and when you set the bonds later in the year, I'll just make a note of that. But there are some significant investments recommended in facilities, parks, and transportation in the capital improvement budget. So Again, specific projects, specific details and timing, I would encourage you to visit with department heads when they come in. So on the enterprise, before I go forward to the enterprise, maybe, Madam Chair, if you have any specific questions I could take.
Right, and we do. Thank you for that break. And first, it's Mr. Bosky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lance, when you talk about completing Spenard Road with bond funds, are you talking about existing funds or new bonds specifically for Spenard Road?
I believe in this, so it's primarily new bonds.
You're welcome, Mr. Bosky. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Steele?
How about Diamond Phase 2?
Pardon me?
Diamond Road,
Thank you, Jeff.
Phase 2 of from Westchester to up around the corner, whatever.
Mr. Steele, I don't know. I don't know one way or the other on that. I cannot recall.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Flynn?
Yeah, a couple things. On Spenard specifically, when we made the perhaps erroneous decision to put that into the AMATS program, obviously that's getting to a higher level of environmental review. And so before we make the decision to revert to bond funding, I would like to confirm that we can step that back and in fact do a more cursory environmental health process.
And the short answer is, we believe we can. DOT and our own planning and project staff agree with that. But, and there'll be an AMAS conversation where you can ask them directly. But I think DOT is in fact relieved that the municipality is considering this approach.
I know they are.
Yeah.
But Tim wants to follow up on that before.
Yeah, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr.
I have one
Steele?
more question when he's done.
In fact, we haven't spent any federal money yet, but since it's in my district, I would hate to turn loose of the federal money before we decided whether or not we were going to have state money. But there's a lot of different. We have more flexibility with state money than we do. So, and it would take us longer.
The only other comment, if I may, Madam Chair, and our legislative program typically follows the budget, but I would encourage us to have, and this is ultimately Mr. Peterson and his constant purview, with a little bit of helpful advice from me. I'd like to see us have a slimmed down legislative program this year on the capital side, because I was kind of embarrassed to what we passed last year. Far too excessive.
Are you finished, Mr. Flynn?
That's it.
I'm so sorry you were embarrassed. Mr. Wilbur, you could please continue.
Madam Chair.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Bosky. Sorry about
I
that.
almost forgot about the very large gorilla in the room. What is the administration's, with the capital program specifically, the legislative program, what is the strategy going to be with the Port of Anchorage?
I'm going to get to that.
Roger that.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Mr. Wilbur, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
So I kind of like to highlight maybe some things in the utilities and operating budget. Really, when looking at their proposals and their submissions at a high level, while they do have some adjustments here and there, but really no significant adjustments in both and pretty much all of those utilities. I think the Enterprise Utilities Committee is briefed on a monthly basis. I think what you are familiar with and what you'll see as an entire body of the Assembly will not be anything significantly different as it relates to operating capital, a little different. One thing I will note here, there's no new rate increases in 16. Those of you who may be familiar with the MLMP, there was a rate increase that was approved this year. I believe takes effect next year. Other than that, there are no other adjustments in the rates for the utilities. So, and if they do, they're going to be very, very small. I think ALU may have a minor adjustment, but I talked to Mr. Joker, but honestly, I think in the grand scheme of things, I'll leave him to get to that. But the Port of Anchorage, I mean, maybe one thing on the Port of Anchorage on their operating side, they're bringing a lot of fuel into Alaska, so their revenues are up, and so it's ironic, but I think 78% of the material and value coming across the port is fuel. it's a huge amount. They're actually building more tanks down there. So, and then solid waste services, maybe one point I'll bring out here is you will see a $500,000 dividend directed towards the support of general government. Last year it was $2 million. It's a smaller amount for this proposed budget. So then my last slide, or my second to last slide, has to do with the capital budget. And really, what I would like to point out to this body and the members of the audience is really, I think these capital programs, these guys are really looking at preserving what they have and finishing what they have underway. Particularly with AWWU, they have an extensive investment underground in water and sewer, and they're looking to preserve that and improve where they need to make those improvements. Merrill Field, I think they have small taxiway projects that you'll hear about from Merrill Field, which is primarily federally funded. We'll be looking to the completion of Plant 2A in June, hopefully, from ML&P. The port, Ms. Kondowski, may I just say a large state request. And I think the reason in talking to the port is this: they have money on hand and they want to complete the port improvements to the north. And their approach is basically a design build. And in order to do a design build, you have to have all the money to let the contract. And so they have part of the money to do that. So they'll present to their logic with you about how they want to move forward on the Port of Anchorage project and the logic of their request and the amount. So look forward to that conversation with them. And then I think at Solid Waste Services, talking to Paul Alcantar, there is really no significant capital improvements that they're looking to. Obviously, he's got some programs, he's got some work he's doing out at the landfill and the collections, but generally nothing significant, large surprises, but there may be something of interest to you when you see those capital programs from the utilities. So if you have questions about the utilities that I can take to them, it would be great, and we can get them educated on those needs.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilbur. Ms. Johnston.
With both AWW and MLB, we used to maintain not any rate increases, but we need to always consider that equity ratio. And that was what we had this. I still can't understand how they could make this value not do a dividend when we have a better debt equity ratio than the rest of the anyway. So as far as the capital program, AWW has always been in a catch-22 because they have to use, or they use the state revolving loan fund, which is a loan which changes the debt equity, which also it's a very, very low rate of interest. But and one of the ways we've been able to manage it is by extending their they renew their pipes and
Service life.
Service life. And I just hope, thank you.
Don't worry. Spend a lot of time there.
So, as they're having discussions with the administration, I think we need to be aware of the service life because there's always an interest of cutting that to a shorter, but then that will have a huge impact. And we've spent many hours on it. And I'm very comfortable as an assembly member with the current service life.
Okay.
And with just having some of their, they've got ways of dealing with heating pipe as opposed to just completely taking the whole pipe off of the
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. You may, Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, because this is years ago. We basically were presented with a double-digit rate increase schedule as far as the eye could see from AWU based on 20-year service life replacement schedule. And we told them no, not to go too fine a point on it. And they went back and did new analysis and based on northern climate research and so on and so forth. And so some pipes that were on 20-year replacement schedules were 50 and 70 and 90, I think. So it would be helpful in a presentation for them to just sort of go over where they are in that analysis and what updates they've made since the last time we had the discussion. And shepherd that through.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Wilbur, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
I do have some closing comments if I don't.
Great.
So I just want to, any assembly members are aware of this, just to kind of remind members of the assembly and members of the public kind of where we are and where we're going. The clerk has scheduled work sessions pretty much every, well, not every, I think every Friday, from now until the 1st of November. What I would encourage the assembly is, if in the order that you want them, who you want there, obviously we will make available at the times that you want available there, to make sure that we're giving you all the information that you need to make a decision. If there's a piece of information, you can reach out to me, reach out to obviously Mr. Abbott, Mr. Harris, the mayor. We will get to you as soon as possible. If we don't know the answer, we'll get it to you as quick as possible. So please reach out to us. We want to make sure that all the information that you need you have, and then whatever work sessions you want, we will have, and when you want, we'll get you connected. So the budget, we will be loading it into Paste this afternoon. The books will be available in the clerk's office between 4 and 5 o'clock this afternoon for the assembly members. Gets introduced to the assembly formally on the 13th, which is in a couple weeks. Followed with a couple work sessions. The first public hearing will be scheduled as requested on the 27th of October, which is 2 weeks, and then another one in early November. And then depending on how that goes and the kind of questions you have, there is the possibility that the assembly could approve this budget before Thanksgiving, on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So a couple other comments I want to make on this schedule. I'm going to obviously reach out to the municipalities budget advisory committee, give a presentation to them and give them an opportunity to ask me questions so that they can formulate a recommendation to the administration and to the assembly. I'm already scheduled to meet with planning and zoning on the capital budget. We're going to have a work session whenever they want to do it on a lunch hour Thursday. I'm scheduled to go to their meeting in early November on the capital budget, so hopefully you'll have something from them. And then others, if there's others that want to hear from us, we will make ourselves available as much as we can to in the next month. So I think with that, I just turn it over to the mayor if he has any closing comments, and then you guys have a list of questions that you're thinking about, and we can go from there.
Just give me 1 second. Mr. Hall, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Mr. Hall has just joined us. We're just about done, but thank you for joining us, Mr. Hall. Mr. Mayor?
Okay. It was time drawn on my calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you.
Well, I just want to thank the Assembly. I know this process is best served when people work together constructively. I just want to reassure everybody here that the administration is prepared to do that. To the extent we can answer questions or help formulate better responses, we're ready for that. So we're here, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Trainee has a question.
Mayor, are you planning to take this out to the public in work sessions around town, say Girdwood, Eagle River, Anchorage Bowl, so the public can understand what the administration is bringing forward to the assembly? Is that in your schedule of things to do?
That's an excellent suggestion, and I will.
I'm just thinking about the school district that does an awfully good job on it. It would be good if we did the same thing. And we reach out to you, reach you, yeah. I'd appreciate it. I don't want them to have to drive in. It's better if we drive out.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Mbosky?
I appreciate the opportunity because to me, I view today as an intro to what we're going to see. It's different than what I'm used to. Obviously, I'm used to seeing the nuts and bolts today. So I'm not disappointed. I won't say that. It was just a different strategy, and I appreciate the openness. But I want to make it very, very clear that I do want to go through the budget book. And I want to make sure, just as you have indicated you're willing to do, I want to go through the departments and talk to them about their positions, the challenges they have, those kinds of things. And I just want to reemphasize the positions with SAP. That's not me. The positions with SAP, I just want a better understanding of really what the impacts are, because what I don't want to see is a shell game where we're pulling the SAP positions out of the operating budget, and then we're going to have additional costs on top of it. So I think I'm hearing what Mr. Abbott's saying, and I'm probably going to be comfortable with it, but I don't feel like I have a full grasp on really what the impacts are moving it from the operating budget to the capital budget, and if that really is a wise financial decision. And as Ms. Johnston pointed out, the auditors I believe, had raised some issues. So I just want to understand again what those issues are and make sure that we're doing this appropriately. So I think just a conversation about that will be helpful. I look forward to the future work sessions because I think that's where the meat and potatoes will be. And I'm sure we're going to have a budget at the end. So
We're happy to serve up some more drinks now.
well, that's a good analogy.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Mr. Hall, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. And I just want to remind everyone that on November 20th is when we're going to have a work session to go over the Assembly amendments. And we have our budget analysts, and we're kind of trying to work out the details in terms of the process. But you'll know ahead of time so that we can have a smooth process on our side when it comes to making our proposed amendments to the 2016 budget.
Standard form for everybody's amendments.
Mr. Trainee, would you like to make a comment?
So we have a standard form for everybody's amendments. So if you bring one the same form, that way we can address each one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee. Any other comments, questions? Mr. Wilbur.
I'd like to follow up on Ms. Dombrowski's comment about the format of this, because this is the first one that we've done under this administration. If we go through this process and there is something that you would like to see different, we can learn from, please let us know. We'll make a note of that. I thought a general overview of the entire thing of what you're going to get would be a good approach at a large scale before we just delve into one particular thing. And so if that's not beneficial that we go through this, please let me know, and then we'll adjust accordingly. If you want to do it a little different, then we'll do that. So just let me know.
Madam Chair, may I?
Certainly, Mr.
I
Dombrowski.
certainly didn't want to imply that it was bad.
No,
That's not what I meant
I
at
didn't
all.
take it that way.
It was just something different that, it was totally different. And so my expectation was to have a little bit more detail and analysis, but, I appreciate the overview because it can kind of direct us on where we're going. I just want to make sure that I'm emphasizing the fact that I don't want to skip the detail.
Very good. Mr. Steele. Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Mr. Steele.
Yeah, thank you. It is different, but it's a good shot, and I certainly appreciate it. I hope I'm anxious to see the detail with regards to the enterprise committees, especially. There's some changes there in terms of how we're approaching things, and so it's going to be interesting to see.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Trainee, do you want to make a comment?
I want to make sure the Budget Advisory Commission, once you guys get a copy of the budget, then make some point to come and talk to us about your findings. Because I really want to hear what you have to say. Take an hour work session. Because right now you haven't seen the budget. We haven't seen it yet. I want you to look at the budget and make recommendations based on that budget to us. Thank you.
Any other comments? I have just one last comment, and it's in regard to Mr. Dombrowski's comment. And I too was expecting to see a little more detail because I'm going to be in front of the camera in a minute, but I don't have much to say. But
I got some pointers for you.
but with that said, I mean, it's a new administration and things change, and I suspect at the next work session on October 9th we'll have more detail. Plus, our budget books are upstairs ready for us to take home and read this weekend. After 4. After 4, before we leave. Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, work session is adjourned.